Hello, and welcome to Symphony Preview on Helena Civic Television. My name is Cameron, the Helena Symphony's Director of Development and Communications, and I'm chatting today with Maestro Alan R. Scott all about our Season 68 closing night, Sweeney Todd. Maestro, thank you so much for joining us, and let's just dive right in. Tell us a little bit about why you chose Sweeney Todd as the closing performance for this season.
This is one of the productions that we were supposed to do 2 years ago that we ended up not doing. And with the cast and getting it all rescheduled, so it took us a while to get it back on the schedule. But this is not the first time the Helena Symphony is doing Sweeney Todd. We did it, I think it's 18 years ago. It was my second year, I suppose, second or third year. But it was when I wanted to start bringing full-staged operas to Helena, and this was one of the first full-stage productions that we did. And so I thought it was time to revisit it, and I'm so thrilled that we're doing this again. It's obviously a completely new cast, a great stage director from Cleveland Opera Theater, Scott Skiba, a fantastic lighting designer, a set that's really going to be exciting, and fully staged, not a concert version. So the orchestra's in the orchestra pit, fully staged, the chorus fully staged, and we'll use 50 members of the 100-voice chorus. And the challenge, of course, is we're doing it as opposed to a normal 3-week run, which is what you do for opera, at least 3 weeks to get it up off the ground. Sure. And then you perform it for 2 to 3 weeks. We'll get it up off the ground in 9 days, and we'll perform it once.
Right.
But so, you know, that's kind of the only lament, because I think we all wish we could do it more. So, but this production, I think it's very timely. I had programmed it, like I said, 2 years ago, and Mr. Sondheim died 18 months ago. So it's especially appropriate. I did not know that they were going to be opening a new show on Broadway with it, with Josh Groban as the title role. But this work has a lot of history as musical theater, as Sondheim would prefer, but also New York City Opera, Houston Grand Opera, and so many opera companies keep it part of repertoire. It's very common. There are 2 roles that you don't do as part of the opera: the boy role, played by Charlie Tingen. It's the role of Toby, and he's a Broadway actor who's right now on the national tour of My Fair Lady. And then the role of Mrs. Lovett, which is also not a role that's an opera singer typically. Those 2 roles are the traditional musical theater roles, and the rest of the cast is often opera singers. And Mrs. Lovett was made iconic by Angela Lansbury. Right. And what I love about Sondheim in general is that what we think is true is often not. And the people that we often identify with as the audience are often the wrong people, and we don't realize it until later. Right. So, and it's not, it's normal to give the spoilers in opera. So Mrs. Lovett, and literally her name's that for a reason, because we love her. She's funny, she's charming, she is really the most dynamic personality on stage. Which is why Angela Lansbury was so good at it, because she's such a lovable, I mean, she played Mrs. Potts in Beauty and the Beast. She's so lovable. She played this when this opened and created the role in the late 70s, and that's where we fall blindly into the love with her, and we don't realize till the last moment that she is probably the only one has no remorse at all for anything. Sure. She is, Sondheim says she's the devil. Even the little buns she wears her hair are meant to be like horns. She is purely the devil, and yet we're laughing with her, and we're having so much fun, and we're so repulsed by the judge who has stolen Sweeney Todd's, raped Sweeney Todd's wife, but also then took Sweeney Todd's daughter and raised her as his own, and now is going to marry her. It's very perverse. And yet the judge, he's not a mere monster. He's the only one who asks for forgiveness in a very bizarre way. He's self-flagellating himself, but he's saying, mea culpa, forgive me, forgive me. So he's like a Shakespeare character. His thoughts are above, but his actions are below. Right. You know. So I like to refer to it as the tragedy of Sweeney Todd, because Sweeney Todd is a tragic figure, and ultimately we are Sweeney Todd. And that's the rub, that the audience can't, we're frustrated because we can't fully hate the judge.
Sure.
When we realize that Mrs. Lovett is the one who's responsible for all these evil doings, everything, then we're mad at ourselves. And this is the idea that one of the lines in the very end is that perhaps today you gave a nod to Sweeney Todd, you, the audience, because we are Sweeney Todd is what Sondheim is getting at. And the great thing is, in the original, Sondheim then Sweeney Todd slams the door on the audience's face. How dare you judge me? And because he just came back, he just wanted to find his wife and daughter. He believes his wife is dead. Mrs. Lovett tricks him. The idea of putting the dead bodies into pies, that's the comedy. That's
Sure.
what we often miss. We think, oh, that's the funny part. This is the dark comedy, like a Coen Brothers movie or something.
Right.
That's not the point. And cannibalism was very popular, metaphor at this time. I mean, centuries prior to these old serial killer comics of Sweeney Todd in the 1800s. We had Shakespeare writing Titus Andronicus.
Right.
We had Jonathan Swift coming up with the immortal's proposal, saying to the British, well, if you're all starving, just eat your children.
Sure.
And so this idea of waste not, want not. It's the era of Dickens. Times is hard, so desperate measures must be taken. So this idea that the cannibalism, that's not the point, but it's a symbol. It's a man-eat-man world.
Right.
And it's also the survival of the fittest. Man becomes more like machine, where his hand is complete now that he has a razor. There's machine music. From the very get-go, Mrs. Lovett is almost like a machine, and Sweeney Todd becomes like one. And so there's classism, there's resignation, there's tragedy. It is a revenge play. It's hard to say it's a morality play. In a morality play, someone is all good and someone is all bad.
Right.
There really isn't. But in the end, it's a commentary about how we're so immune to violence that whether it be internet or TV or whatever, it's just, we laugh at it.
Sure.
And but it's also a commentary that, as Sondheim often does, like in Into the Woods, be careful what you wish for. In Sunday in the Park with George, that the only thing we can leave in this world is children and art. With Sweeney Todd, it's very much that even normal, healthy, sane human beings sometimes prefer destruction. They want it. You want to bring down that political party, or you want that particular part of society to be done away with. It's a metaphor. But ultimately, I think Sondheim is trying to do with all of his works is connect us, to find connection. And so when we realize we're all judging Sweeney Todd, and we shouldn't, there's the connection. So there's beautiful moments, there's hysterical moments, there's heartbreaking moments, there's terrible moments that are just vulgar, terrible. But it is operatic in scope.
Sure.
It's larger than life. And it'll be a large orchestra, a chorus, a cast of 10. Great.
And tell me a little bit about the cast. I know that we have a really amazing star who's going to be joining us for Sweeney Todd. So let us know a little bit about the kind of people that we're bringing to perform with us.
Yeah, so like I said, you want mainly opera singers except for those two roles. So Toby is played by a Broadway actor. He's a young actor, and he's in the new touring production of My Fair Lady. The title role, Sweeney Todd, is played by Gabriel Presser. And Gabe recently won a Grammy Award. We have the same agent, but we've been talking about working together for years. And I saw him in a production about 7 years ago. It was Marriage of Figaro. And often opera singers aren't always the greatest actors.
Sure.
He's an amazing actor, and of course a great singer. The role that sort of is the glue is Mrs. Lovett, and it's played by my wife, who Megan Scott, who has a career as an actress, playing a lot of Sondheim. And then the role of the judge, Charles Robert Stevens, used to be at New York City Opera for decades. He has been here well over a dozen times. He and I have done 15 to 20 different operas together throughout our careers. We've known each other for almost 30 years. The role of Joanna is played by a wonderful Southern soprano. She and I recently did a Puccini opera in Tennessee about 5 years ago. And the role of Keith Harris is by a great baritone. And so the role of the beggar woman, Sweeney Todd's wife, who we don't realize at the time, another mezzo-soprano, really great actress, Kate Jackman. So a fabulous stage director, Scott Skiba from Cleveland Opera Theater. So it's a real all-star cast.
Great.
Locally, Kev Ham, who's done a lot of acting in his career, is playing the role of the Beadle, which is sort of the judge's evil assistant, sort of the sheriff, if you will. And I wanted him for very specific reasons. It's a really great cast from all over, near and far. And but ultimately, it's about the message of Sweeney Todd, and so I'm really excited about bringing this. And this is a fully staged production, so it's one performance only. As we sit here days before, it's nearly sold out.
Yep.
So we encourage people to secure their seats.
Definitely, and you can buy your tickets for Sweeney Todd by either calling the Helena Symphony office at 406-442-1860 or online at helenasymphony.org. And like Maestro Scott said, tickets are selling very fast. I think that there's actually only a handful of seats left in those front few sections, so you'll definitely want to order your tickets today. Tell us a little bit about why you think somebody who has never been to a Helena Symphony concert before should attend Sweeney Todd.
I think operas are always the best way to introduce yourself to classical music in general, because there's visuals.
Sure.
There's a story. There's costumes. People playing make-believe effectively. You know, the first 3 words of Sweeney Todd, attend the tale. And it's a fable. It has a lesson, but it's also a story that we can relate to, just like the Grimes brothers, the Grimm's fairy tales. So I think there's this opera in general. It's in English, but opera in general is always a great introduction to classical music because it's larger than life. It's usually not reality, but it finds themes that speak to us. And usually operas have funny moments. Almost every opera, even the tragedies, have funny moments, have heartbreaking moments. We can still feel that they're not just two-dimensional characters. They have feelings. They have a story. The plot line itself, often in operas, is preposterous.
Sure.
But we use this escapist entertainment to find meaning. It's the same thing with these sort of reality shows on TV. There's nothing real about them.
Right.
But yet we're glued to them. We find connection through their silly stories.
Of course.
But if it's done right, in an opera, hopefully if it's done right, we find meaning through them in other ways. They're still feeling same human emotions.
Sure. And
they're expressing themselves in song. So this is so exciting, and it's one of the iconic, and especially with Stephen Sondheim, he made, arguably, and of course I don't think there's an argument, but he is the greatest composer, American composer and lyricist. His surrogate father is Oscar Hammerstein of the Rodgers and Hammerstein fame, and then he collaborated with Leonard Bernstein on West Side Story. Sondheim wrote the lyrics to, and Candide. And then he's had his career of his own that goes back 60 years. And he just died at the age of 91. And I started my career working for Mr. Sondheim for 6 years almost, and was privileged I was asked to write the full score to Sweeney Todd. So the conductor score for it, there was no conductor score. And so I spent several years of my life on this particular work. So I've lived with it so long, and it never gets old.
Sure.
I don't perform it much anymore, but it's been 15 years. But I used to perform it dozens of times every year for many years. So it's really great to revisit this. And I think people who love theater, people who love music, people who love great story, people who like sort of that Jacobean tragedy with blood and all this, or the bizarreness, the dark comedies of like a Fargo from Coen Brothers. It has that sort of humor, but also has beautiful, tender moments too that are so touching. So you get it all.
Definitely.
And this appeals to the mind and the heart for sure. But in this case, it also appeals to the stomach, I guess, in
Sure.
a bad and good way. I don't know. But.
Definitely. Well, it is a show that you will not want to miss. Our closing night of season 68. Tickets are on sale now. And of course, a huge thank you to all of our sponsors, AARP Montana, the sponsor of the Masterworks concert series, and our concert sponsors, Deloitte and Helena Home Team. Thank you so much, and we'll see you in the concert hall.